So what do we actually have here? We have 10 circles called sefirot and one black hole, and it pretty much is a black hole too, that demonstrate the patterns of creation, and they're repeated in the larger diagram at the 4 levels of divinity, spirit, form or psyche, and physical world. But to start with, it's important to try and understand this one. Otherwise, you're just going to run screaming for the hills going much, much, much too complicated. And we have to start teaching it from the bottom, but in fact, it's much better lived from the top. Hopefully, I'll manage to explain how that works. Here is Malkut. It means kingdom or sovereignty, and it's actually the manifestation, the physical point, this actual physical body living in the world. But this whole diagram, known as the Tree of Life, is in Yetzirah. Yetzirah, the world of images and forms, and only the bottom part here is the part of us that's manifest in the physical world. The rest of it, these parts here are psychological, emotional, and intellectual, and this part here is deeply connected to spirit, and through the top sephira here, connected to the world of the divine. That's not actually God itself. It's the part of the divine we might call Shekinah in the Jewish tradition, or the glory. It's the aspect of the divine that we can conceive of. Beyond that, right up in the higher echelons, we can't even comprehend what God might be. And it's so important for the spiritual seeker to understand that we have to be at peace with the idea of mystery. Since the Enlightenment, the world has become very rational. It wants proof, it wants evidence. But the mystic understands, and I'm only an aspiring beginner on the very path of getting to be a mystic, nowhere near anything that really, truly, deeply understands this, that the mystic has to live with paradox, has to understand that many things have to be held together and that we cannot do this journey alone. Kabbalah is meant to be taught in groups because it's all about discussion. This is just an introductory series of videos. But if you're interested, find yourself a group, find yourself a study group. There are many out there on the internet. My own particular founding school is on the website KabbalahSociety.org, and there are many teaching groups there. But you must find the one that suits you, the tradition that suits you. And we can talk about that more in future videos. So this is physical reality. This is who we think we are. This is our place in the tribe, in the family, in our country, in our nation. And most of us live there 95% of the time, which isn't necessarily bad, but this is the place, Yesod, and it's appropriately called. It means foundation, but in English, it's ye little sod, frankly, because this is the part of us that seeks separation, division, and needs an enemy. Our tribe, your tribe. Now, a balanced ego, a balanced Yesod, wouldn't call that the enemy, but it will still understand the whole process of binary, duality, separation. Any interpretation of scripture that makes anyone excluded, and I include Orthodox Christianity in that, especially the exclusion of gay folk and the use of law beyond spirit. Kabbalah teaches it's vital that spirit and law must be combined, because even though something may be an unskillful practice, you're still there to love the person through it. And also, we're meant to evolve. Back in the days of the Hebrew 613 laws, most of them made absolute sense for a society that was living in desert conditions without hot running water, antibiotics, a nearby A&E, or even a local therapist or spiritual healer. They did not necessarily make sense now, because Kabbalah is a tradition that must update. It's the oral tradition that underpins the children of the book, Jews, Christians, and Islam. Not so much Islam. Islam has gone off in its own particular direction, but the Hebrew Testament is all Kabbalah, and the New Testament is all Kabbalah. Trust me on that one. There are a few books out there nowadays that will show you that, but we're going ahead of ourselves. But any religion that works from this level, and most religion does, is kindergarten religion, because it's running by law and it's running by old rules. It hasn't updated, and its aim is to divide. It's not transformational, it's transactional. You do this, you'll go to heaven. You do that, you'll go to hell. And that's why we have such a rash of atheism in the world today, because we know perfectly well that cannot be so. That is an old binary duality system, and we humans are meant to evolve. The teachings of the New Testament are very clear that the outsider is quite frequently the one who's got more access to the truth than we have. On the other hand, Yesod is fabulous because it's the part of our brain back here that remembers things. Yesod is always drawing the past and the present, in past and the future into the present. And that's both good and bad, because it says, because it's always been like this, it's always got to be like this. But it also remembers how to breathe while you're asleep. It remembers how to walk. It remembers where you left your breakfast in the cupboard in the kitchen. It remembers where the kitchen is. It remembers how to turn the taps on in the shower or the bath so that you don't burn yourself. And it needs to be trained. A very young child is having its Yesod trained. It's learning how to live in its family, how to live in its tribe. And if it's in a healthy family and a healthy tribe, it learns healthy aspects. If it's not in a healthy one, it will learn unhealthy aspects. It will learn how to get the attention it needs to survive. That's not just the food it needs to survive, how to interact, how to react within the family, within the situation it finds itself, in order to get enough attention to learn how to live safely in that tribe. And Yesod, when a child, usually goes in one or two directions. It conforms or it rebels. It conforms because it gets its strokes by conforming, or it rebels because it at least gets the attention it needs in order to learn how to handle the tribe. So it's incredibly important. And when you're learning from the bottom up, which a baby is, you're going to learn a lot of unskillful attitudes in this modern world. Back in the days when the Tree of Life was being formulated, and back in the days of the menorah, we lived mostly in small towns or in rural societies, in villages. And it does take a village to raise a child. We lived in much more simple aspects. And in every village, every child had a use, a purpose. We all need a purpose. Even the village child who was simple could certainly weave some rushes or do something useful, and had a place, found a place and a purpose and a value. And in this modern world, so often we don't have a place, a purpose, or a value. So we start off floating in this strange world of not knowing how to fit. And I never fitted. You probably never fitted. We had no place, no solid foundation in which to fit. And the solid foundation, the vessel of Yesod, is so important for us to grow from. It's a bit like the soil in which we're planted. And if it's a soil with poison in it, it's really, really hard for us to grow up. The next sefirot is Hod. This is the place of our thoughts and our intellectual processes. And as a child, it's our fascination with dinosaurs or ponies or certain books. And it's all about how you learn to read and write. And we stay in Hod so frequently. Hod is the news. Hod is repetitive aspects. I used to be a journalist, and although the news we tend to think means news, it doesn't. It was originally north, east, west, south, drawing in information from all over the world. And information is not knowledge, and information is not wisdom. And Hod is also associated with Mercury, the planet Mercury. The moon is Yesod because it changes, but it's the same. It goes round the same cycles again. And Hod is similar in that when I was a journalist, I realized that even though we might call it new, we were reporting cycles. Kabbalah is all about understanding the cycles, the patterns. Every year there would be this different range of conferences or strikes. This was back in the 1970s. Every year, British Leyland went on strike. I was working in the Midlands. And It was just cyclical, coming around a new version of the old. And that's how marketing will work too, which is new and improved based on the old. So you think it's exciting and different, but actually it's going around this circle of Yesod again and again and again. And all our complaints are cyclical as well. If you go on social media, you'll find somebody in Hod complaining about the BBC being a left-wing bias. And you'll find the next post is about the BBC being a right-wing bias. And here we have our confirmation biases. We seek evidence of what we've already been taught to believe. We have to get out of what we're taught to believe to find out what we truly do believe. All the QAnon stuff, all the conspiracy theories are locked here because they start from the ego needing to be right. And the mystic doesn't need to be right. The mystic seeks to be happy and to spread happiness. The next sefirot is Netzach. This is our active principles, our creative principles, our artistic, positive, joyful, sexy aspects. This is the part of us that wants to put on makeup and grow up. This is the part of humanity that doesn't want to grow old. It wants to be beautiful. This is Venus in the planets and in the goddess aspects. So we want to look young, we want to look sexy, we want to look attractive, we want to have excitement. So you can actually see how we live in this sort of vicarious, illusionary world of distractions, because Netzach will rush to a new box set. Whenever you see somebody telling you that they're sick on social media, they're going to go, what can I watch to distract myself from this? And Yesod and this little cyclical aspect forms the whole aspect of how humanity is living in illusions. We live in the illusions. We live in what we see, what we hear. And unfortunately, by the law of resonance, which in modern creation is called the law of attraction, we create what we imagine. We draw more of it to ourselves because we train this aspect of the brain to dictate, which it does, what we perceive through our eyes, our ears, and our nose, and how we even breathe. The brain selects what is shown to consciousness. So what we're trained in, what we believe in, will show up for us repeatedly. The next sefirot is Tiferet, and this is the place of the true self. This is the place we get to when we need to experience anything new. Tiferet doesn't deal with the old, it deals with the new. Yesod is the repeating cycles. Tiferet is the aspect that can see something new, see something afresh. It's the aspect of us that can look up at the sky at night and go, oh, wow. And Tiferet is truly in the present. It's able to take all the experiences of Yesod, but use them for something new. Tiferet is where you get to, where you do something extraordinary because there's a crisis. And quite often the crises in our lives are to get us to Tiferet, to see things in a new way, not to go around the same old cyclical purpose. Because if we're unhappy, we're going round in a cycle that doesn't bring us joy. And we have to have some form of crisis, new experience to lift us up and out of that. I'm just talking about the circles, the sefirot at the moment. These triads as well are really important in this aspect of how we get onto the path of joy, because the road to joy is the road itself. And seeking Tiferet is quite difficult because we get out of our family's cycles. My family have for years called me flaky or weird or silly, mainly because they're perfectly happy down here. I wasn't. I had to seek something new. I had to learn to look at the world through new eyes, different eyes. I had to say, what's new? What's different here? This can't actually be right. I need to investigate this, and I need to jump into the mystery. We love the mystery. Most of our favorite books and TV series and movies are about mystery. In the modern world, they're the Marvel ones, which still take us into war. Even The Lord of the Rings takes us into war. It was written as a response to the Second World War. But the spiritual seeker seeks peace. Yes, we have to go through that path of exile, that path of battling, but we're always looking for the promised land. The promised land is here in the area of the soul. Here we have Egypt in the story of the Exodus. Here we have the desert, the awakening, the coming out into the wilderness, seeking the promised land that is here. And it's in Exodus that we get the menorah and the idea of this pattern, how we get out into the wilderness and find the route to paradise, the return to paradise. And this part, getting out, is not necessarily fun. It's really hard work, and it's so tempting to turn back. Once we've got to the sefirot point, the point of truth and beauty, this is really important because they meld. Truth and beauty. If it's not beautiful, it's not a perennial truth. It's a partial or passing truth. We learn about perennial truths, and that's how we get deeper and understand the nature of our soul. Our soul is here between Tiferet, truth and beauty, Gevurah, which is discipline and discernment, deeply unpopular, and Hesed, which is loving kindness, steadfast love or mercy. And we'll talk about the soul and more about that in the next video.